Welcome to The Deep Dive. We're the podcast where we really get into the weeds on fascinating topics. And today, imagine this for a second. You see these elegant kind of curved symbols, maybe on some artwork or, clothing or maybe even as a tattoo. They look cool, right? But they're more than just shapes. They're actually hinting at a much deeper story, something really old and, honestly, incredibly resilient. Today, we're jumping into Baybayin. That's B-A-Y-B-A-Y-I-N. An ancient and, well, really beautiful writing system from the Philippines. Our mission here is to kind of unpack it all. Its history, which has some surprises, how it actually works mechanically, which is fascinating, its modern comeback, which is huge, and what it really means for Filipino identity today. We looked at a whole stack of stuff for this old historical accounts, academic papers, modern art projects, even like online forum discussion. So, yeah, it should be a pretty comprehensive and hopefully really engaging deep dive. Okay, so let's unpack this right from the start. When we talk about Baybayin, what exactly is it? Is it just like an old alphabet or is there more to it?
That's a really good place to start because, yeah, the term itself isn't always clear. At its heart, Baybayin is an ancient writing script from the Philippines, and it was used, widely long before the Spanish arrived. But honestly, just calling it a script, it kind of undersells its cultural weight. It holds this really special place, It's a powerful symbol of identity, of heritage.
Heritage.
Exactly. And the word Baybayin itself, it actually means to spell or to write in Tagalog, so its name tells you exactly what it was for. It was a tool for expression.
Ah, okay, to spell. That makes sense. But speaking of names, there's that other name people sometimes use, right? That's actually incorrect.
Oh, yeah. You're probably thinking of Alibata. And you're right, that's a really common mistake, and it's important to clear up. Alibata is, well, it's just wrong, historically speaking. It was a term made up in the 20th century by a guy named Paul Versosa. He thought, mistakenly, that Baybayin came from the Arabic alphabet, alif, bata.
Ah, I see the connection he was trying to make.
Right, but there's absolutely zero historical or linguistic evidence for that. It was just a wrong guess. So yeah, using the correct name, Baybayin, is really important. It respects the script's actual origins.
Got it. Baybayin it is. So thinking back before European colonizers, there's sometimes this image of pre-colonial societies as maybe, primarily oral cultures, perhaps not widely literate. What's the reality for the Philippines back then? Were people actually writing?
That image, it gets completely turned on its head when you look at the Philippines. The historical record is actually pretty amazing on this. When the Spanish conquistadors first got there in the 16th century, they were genuinely surprised, maybe even shocked.
Shocked? Why?
Because they found that most Filipinos were illiterate. They were actively using Baybayin. There's this Jesuit friar, Pedro Chirino, who wrote in 1604, and he specifically said almost everyone in Manila could read and write it, even women.
Wow, almost everyone, even women. That really challenges the narrative.
It absolutely does. This wasn't some elite skill. It was part of everyday life, used across society. Pretty advanced for the time, actually, even compared to parts of Europe.
Okay, so if it was so widespread, how were they using it day to day? Was it for big official things or more personal stuff?
Both, really. It was incredibly versatile. People used it for personal letters, expressing thoughts, feelings, maybe even love notes. Who knows?
Huh, ancient love notes.
Exactly. And it was crucial for storytelling and poetry, recording folk tales, proverbs, epics, keeping that cultural knowledge alive in written form alongside the strong oral traditions, of course. But it was also used for official things. Leaders documented events, kept records, land deeds, maybe even basic contracts. It shows a level of organization.
And what were they writing on? I mean, paper wasn't exactly common, right?
No, not at all. They used what was around them, natural materials. So think leaves, especially palm leaves. Bamboo strips were very common. Tree bark sometimes.
Bamboo? Okay. How did they write on that?
They'd use something sharp. A dagger point, maybe an iron stylus, or even just a sharpened piece of bamboo to kind of carve or scratch the characters into the surface.
Engraving it almost.
Pretty much, yeah. Now, because of these materials, it was generally better for shorter texts, not like writing massive novels, which worked well because the oral tradition was still very strong for the longer narratives. The script complemented it. And thinking bigger picture, Baybayin didn't just pop up in isolation in the Philippines. Its roots go deeper, connecting to a wider world.
Ooh, where did it come from originally?
It's believed to have descended from the Brahmi scripts of South Asia. Probably came through intermediate scripts like Kawi from Java.
Brahmi, like the ancestor of many scripts in India and Southeast Asia.
Exactly. It shows these ancient connections, trade routes, cultural exchange happening across the seas for centuries. Writing systems traveled along with goods and ideas. And you can see clear similarities between Baybayin and other scripts in the region like Javanese, Balinese, the Buzi script from Sulawesi. They're all part of this larger family, this shared heritage of writing in Southeast Asia.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. If it's not an alphabet like English, how does it even work? It sounds fundamentally different.
It is fundamentally different. And yeah, if you're only used to an alphabet, it takes a little shift in thinking. Baybayin is an abugida.
An abugida. Okay, what does that mean?
Basically, in an abugida, the main characters don't just stand for a single letter, like B or K. They stand for a whole syllable, usually a consonant followed by a default vowel sound.
A syllable. Okay, so like ba or ka.
Precisely. Think of it like writing in chunks of sound rather than individual letters. It's much closer to how we actually speak.
Chunks of sound. I like that. So what's the basic setup? How many characters are there, and what's this default vowel rule?
In its traditional form, Baybayin has 17 characters. There are 14 basic consonant characters and then 3 main vowel characters. And here's that key rule. Every consonant character automatically includes the vowel sound A unless you modify it.
Automatically includes A.
Yeah. So the character for K, just written by itself, is pronounced ka. The character for T is ta. B is ba, M is ma, and so on. It's actually pretty efficient for languages like Tagalog, where A is a very common vowel sound.
Okay, that simplifies things a bit. What about the actual vowel characters? You said 3.
Right. There is one for A itself, and then there are 2 others, and this is fascinating. One character represents both E and I, and another character represents both O and U.
Wait, E and I share a character?
Ah.
And U too. Why?
Because in Old Tagalog, those pairs were basically considered variations of the same sound. They weren't distinct phonemes like they are for us in English. Think about how even today in Filipino, someone might say lalaki or lalak for man. That IE variation, it was built right into the script. Same for U.
Huh. So the script reflected the actual sounds of the language very closely. Okay, so if ka is the default, how do you write K or ki or ko or ku? There must be a way to change that A.
Absolutely. That's where the kudlit comes in, Kudlit.
Kudlit, like a little mark.
Exactly. It's a small mark, usually a dot or sometimes a little dash, that modifies the vowel sound. Its placement is crucial. If you want the E or I sound, you put the kudlit above the consonant character. So ka with a kudlit above becomes ko or ku.
Above for O.
Yeah. And if you want the O or U sound, you put the kudlit below the consonant character. So ka with a kudlit below becomes ku or ku.
Below for U. Got it. That's actually quite elegant. Above changes it one way, below changes it the other.
It is, isn't it? Very neat system.
But what if you just want the consonant sound, like at the end of a word? How do you write the T in Salamat? You can't just leave it as ta.
You've hit on a key limitation of the original traditional Baybayin. There was no native way to write just a consonant by itself. It always had that inherent vowel.
So how did they deal with that? Or did they just not?
Well, often the final consonant might have been dropped in pronunciation or implied, but this became a bigger issue when the Spanish friars arrived. They needed to transcribe names, religious terms, and Filipino words more accurately, including those final consonants.
So the Spanish changed it.
They did. Around 1620, a friar named Francisco Lopez introduced a modification. He added a new kind of kudlit, shaped like a cross, called the kudlit kris.
A cross kudlit?
Yeah, and this cross, when placed below the consonant character, cancels the inherent vowel sound completely. So you take the ta character, put the cross kudlit below it, and it becomes just D.
So that's how they solved the final consonant problem, introduced by the Spanish.
Exactly. It first showed up in an Ilocano version of the Doctrina Christiana. It was a practical adaptation, though obviously one driven by colonial needs. But even with that addition, the core principle for writing Baybayin remains wonderfully straightforward. Basically, write it as you say it.
Write it as you say it. Phonetic.
Very phonetic. Compared to English spelling, for example, it's much more direct. You sound out the word syllable by syllable and write the corresponding characters.
Okay, that sounds intuitive. Could we walk through an example, maybe use that word you mentioned, salamat, step by step?
Absolutely. Let's break down salamat. Thank you. First step, always, is syllables. How do we say it? Salamat. 3 syllables.
Salamat. Okay.
Right. So for the first syllable, sa, we just need the character for aus. Remember, it automatically has the es sound. So just the es character. Done.
Simple enough.
Second syllable, la. Same logic. We just write the character for S. It inherently includes the S. So S character, boom, la.
Okay, sa. Now for Matt, this uses that cross thing, right?
Exactly. This is where the Kublit-Kruse comes in. First, you write the character for M. By default, that's ma.
Ma.
Then you write the character for T. By default, that's ta.
Ta. So we have salamata right now.
Right. But we need mat, not mata. So on that final T character, you place the cross kudlit below it.
Below the T.
Below the T. That cross cancels the A vowel, leaving just the T sound. So you have ma followed by T, put it all together, sa character, M character, T character with the cross kudlit below it, salamet.
Salamat. I see it now. You build it syllable by syllable using the defaults, the regular kudlit for other vowels, and the cross kudlit to kill the vowel at the end.
You've got it. That's the fundamental mechanic.
So the system was thriving, people were using it. What happened? The Spanish arrival in 1521 seems like the obvious turning point.
It absolutely was. That marks the beginning of Baybayin's long, gradual decline. The colonizers brought the Latin alphabet, and, well, through administration, education, and especially religion, it slowly but surely took over.
The church played a big role, you mentioned.
A huge role. Catholic priests actively discouraged using Baybayin. They saw the Latin script as more efficient for teaching Christianity, for printing catechisms, for record keeping. Replacing Baybayin with Romanized Tagalog was a deliberate strategy to spread the faith and consolidate control.
So using the alphabet became tied to conversion and assimilation.
Pretty much. It wasn't necessarily always malicious, sometimes just pragmatic from their perspective, but the effect was the same. Baybayin got pushed aside.
Is there like a key document that shows this happening?
The Doctrina Christiana from 1593 is a prime example. It was the very first book printed in the Philippines, quite a landmark.
The first book, wow.
Yeah, and while it famously included sections in Baybayin, alongside Spanish and Romanized Tagalog, its main purpose was to teach Catholic doctrine using the Roman script. So, ironically, this book that preserves some Baybayin in print also helped accelerate the shift away from it.
A tool for transition, even as it recorded the old script?
Exactly. And by the 18th century, maybe even earlier in many areas, Baybayin was rarely used for everyday stuff. It faded into history for most Filipinos.
It's quite sad, really. Did it disappear completely? Or did it somehow cling on somewhere?
This is the amazing part. It didn't completely disappear. Despite everything, it survived. Which speaks volumes about cultural resilience, doesn't it?
It really does. Where? How?
It held on in some more remote areas, particularly among indigenous groups who had less intense contact with the Spanish or maintained more of their traditional culture. Specifically, we know it continued to be used and is still used today, which is incredible by the Buhid and Hanunuo Mangyan peoples on the island of Mindoro.
Still used today.
Yes, and also by the Tagbanua and Palawan communities on Palawan Island. They kept using their related scripts derived from the same ancestors Baybayin for letters, poems, prayers, rituals, a living link.
That's genuinely remarkable, a hidden continuity.
It is, and institutions are working to preserve this too. The National Museum of the Philippines, for instance, has a permanent Baybayin gallery. They display artifacts, colonial documents, and ethnographic items from these communities that still use the scripts. It highlights its importance.
That's great that it's being recognized and preserved institutionally as well. So, fast forward to today. It feels like Baybayin isn't just surviving in those pockets, it's having a resurgence, right? A comeback.
Oh, absolutely. It's more than just a comeback. It's like a cultural renaissance. There's this real palpable energy around it now.
What's driving that? Why now?
I think it's tied to a broader desire, especially among younger Filipinos and the diaspora, to reconnect with their pre-colonial roots, to find a sense of identity that feels truly authentic, something that wasn't imposed by colonizers.
Reclaiming heritage.
Exactly. In a world that's so globalized, Baybayin offers something distinctly Filipino. There was even a survey back in 2018, I think, that found something like 57% of young Filipinos wanted to learn traditional scripts, and Baybayin was top of the list.
Over half. That's significant. So it's more than just an old script, it's a symbol.
A very powerful symbol. It's a reminder of indigenous creativity, of resilience. Learning it, wearing it, using it, it's become a way to express pride in that unique heritage, a bridge connecting the past to the present. It's a visual statement. This is part of who we are.
And you definitely see it more now. Where is it popping up in contemporary culture?
It's kind of everywhere if you start looking, definitely in art and design. Murals, gallery shows, company logos. And fashion. Brands like T. Manila, Baybayin clothing, they've made it central to their aesthetic. T-shirts, hoodies, accessories.
Yeah, I've seen those. Very cool designs.
Right. And tattoos. That's probably one of the most visible signs of the revival.
Tattoos, yeah. That seems really personal.
It is. People get words, names, phrases inked in Baybayin. It's a way to carry your heritage on your skin. And interestingly, that echoes pre-colonial times when tattooing was widespread and significant, as noted by early Spanish observers.
A modern expression of an ancient practice. What about technology? Has that helped the revival?
Technology has been absolutely crucial, game-changing, really. First off, getting Baybayin included in Unicode standards was huge.
Unicode. That's the system that lets computers show all the world's scripts, right?
Exactly. So now you can actually type Baybayin on your phone, on your computer, use it online. It makes it accessible globally. Then you have digital fonts. People have created all sorts of true type fonts. Some mimic the old style from the Doctrina Christiana. Others are based on later historical forms, and some are modern, stylized interpretations.
Fonts like Tagalog Doctrina 1593 or Bisaya Hervas. I saw those names. Does that mean there are different Baybayin scripts for different languages?
Ah, that's a super important clarification and a common point of confusion. While the fonts might have names like Tagalog or Bisaya, Baybayin is fundamentally one writing system with many historical and regional styles or forms.
One system, many styles. Okay.
Right. Think of it like the Latin alphabet. We have print, cursive, italic, bold, different font styles like Times New Roman or Arial. Italic isn't just for writing Italian, right? You can write English in italics.
Good analogy.
Same idea here. The Tagalog Doctrina style isn't only for Tagalog. You could write Ilocano or Bicol using that style if you wanted. The style names likely come from where that particular style was documented, or maybe, just as some scholars say, sloppy reporting by early chroniclers. The key is, don't get hung up on the font names implying linguistic exclusivity. Choose a style you like and use it.
That clears things up significantly. What about online tools?
Loads of them. There are apps, online converters, where you can type a word in Filipino and see it transliterated into Baybayin. Baybayin.com is a popular one. They're great for learning and practice.
But maybe double check before getting a tattoo based on an online converter.
Definitely. Always double check. Maybe consult with someone knowledgeable. Automated tools aren't perfect and nuances can be missed. Wise advice.
What about education? Is it being taught in schools?
Increasingly, yes. Schools and universities are starting to incorporate it into curricula. And there are fantastic grassroots organizations like Articulo Uno, Baybayin Buhan, doing workshops, creating learning materials, really pushing it at the community level.
And the government? Any official moves?
There's been talk and even proposed legislation like the National Writing System Act. The idea is to declare Baybayin the national writing system, maybe require it on signs, official documents, labels alongside the Latin script.
Wow, that would be a massive step. Has it passed?
Not yet, as far as I know. These things take time, and there's debate around it, which we can get into. But the fact that it's being seriously proposed shows how significant the revival movement has become.
Absolutely. And speaking of education and significance, I know there's been some academic research looking specifically at how Baybayin is being used in schools now, especially with digital tools.
Yes, that's right. There's a really interesting study by Edgar S. Slitt from 2024. It looked at St. Michael's College in the Philippines and explored digital Baybayin and cultural narratives in the post-pandemic college techscape.
Okay, digital Baybayin.
Yeah.
What was the study focused on?
It looked at how integrating Baybayin using digital tools impacts students' understanding of cultural narratives and their sense of identity, especially after the pandemic shifted so much learning online. It used some interesting frameworks like Stuart Hall's ideas about how cultural identity is fluid and shaped by practice, and theories about why people adopt technology like, is it useful, is it easy to use, and how do you create a real sense of community and learning online?
So looking at the whole picture, the culture, the tech, the learning experience, what did they find? How do students feel about it?
The findings were pretty positive. Students saw using digital Baybayin as this cool, dynamic merging of their heritage with modern education. They recognized challenges, sure, like making sure digital versions are authentic, getting standardization right, figuring out the best teaching methods.
But they saw the upside, too.
Definitely. They saw opportunities for it being more accessible, for more interactive learning, even for collaborative research. Overall, they felt it helped them reconnect with their heritage, fostered pride, and strengthened their identity.
And did the study identify what works in terms of teaching it digitally?
Yeah, it highlighted things like digitizing old manuscripts to make them accessible, using interactive platforms and multimedia, connecting projects with local communities, and developing courses that cut across different subjects. Basically, finding ways to make it engaging and relevant, not just a history lesson.
And the impact on identity was real.
Apparently, yes. The study found that exposure really did enhance cultural awareness and identity, empowering students to feel like they were active participants in preserving and appreciating their heritage. And it wasn't just St. Michael's. The study mentioned other universities doing cool things too. UP Diliman digitizing manuscripts, Ateneo offering interdisciplinary courses, De La Salle creating a mobile learning app, UST and Mindanao State doing community outreach. So it's happening in multiple places.
That's really encouraging. But like any learning process, there must be common mistakes people make when they first try to learn Baybayin, right? And maybe broader challenges.
Oh, for sure. On the individual level, a big mistake is trying to treat it like an alphabet, writing letter by letter instead of syllable by syllable. That's fundamental. Another is mixing up the kudlit placement, putting it below when you mean I or above when you mean I. Changes the whole sound.
Right. Above for I, below for O.
Exactly. Then there's trying to force foreign sounds like F or V. Baybayin doesn't have those, so you have to adapt phonetically, usually to P or B. Mishandling final consonants is common too, forgetting the cross kudlit or using it incorrectly. And people might use inconsistent character forms, mixing styles, or confuse Baybayin with related but distinct scripts like Kulitan or Surat Mangyan.
Lots of little pitfalls to watch out for.
Oh.
And what about the bigger systemic challenges, especially with the digital side?
The research highlights a few key ones. One is preserving authenticity. How do you digitize it without losing the nuances, the cultural integrity? It's a real concern. Another is standardization. With different fonts and platforms, you get inconsistencies, which can be confusing for learners and hinder universal use. And just generally overcoming technological barriers, making sure the digital tools actually enhance learning and cultural connection, not just become a gimmick or, worse, dilute the meaning.
Right. So authenticity, standardization, meaningful integration. Those are big hurdles. Now, beyond the learning curve and tech issues, you mentioned debate around the National Writing System Act. It sounds like not everyone is convinced about a full-scale Baybayin revival for everyday use. What are some of the arguments against it?
Yeah, there's definitely a pragmatic counter-narrative kicking around, especially online. You hear people saying it's just far too impractical now and in the future.
Wow. Practical how?
Well, a major point is that modern Filipino has evolved. It now clearly distinguishes between 5 vowel sounds, not just the 3 Baybayin originally handled easily. And it's absorbed tons of loan words with sounds like F, J, V, Z, X, CH. Baybayin just wasn't built for those without significant modification. Trying to write modern slang or scientific terms can get really awkward.
The language has outgrown the script, in a way.
That's the argument, yeah. Then there are the logistical and financial costs. Imagine retraining all the teachers, reprinting all the books, changing every single sign in the country. That cost would be astronomical. Critics say that money is desperately needed for basic education improvements.
The question of priorities.
Exactly, and some ask, what's the real advantage? Beyond looking cool on a logo or t-shirt, does it actually help solve poverty, inequality, corruption? Some comments are blunt, it's not going to help with social welfare. There's also the Tagalog-centric argument. Baybayin, in the form most people know, is strongly associated with Tagalog. Imposing it nationwide, critics fear, could alienate other linguistic groups who have their own languages and sometimes their own traditional scripts. Could it cause division rather than unity?
It's a sensitive point.
Very. And finally, there's the straightforward, it doesn't pay the bills argument. Focus on skills for the global economy like AI or English, not an obscure writing system unused in centuries.
Those are some heavy practical objections.
Mhm.
How do proponents respond? Do they have counter-arguments to these concerns about practicality, cost, and relevance?
They do, and they often come from a different philosophical place. On the practical side, many suggest a gradual approach, not an overnight switch. Start with cultural education, optional courses, maybe some symbolic signage. Let it integrate slowly. And there's the idea of evolving Baybayin. Why should it be frozen in the 16th century? Proponents suggest developing new characters or standardizing ways to represent modern sounds, just like the Spanish added the cross kudlit. Make it a living, adaptable script.
Adapting it for modern use.
Yeah, and they might point to other places. Mongolia is slowly trying to bring back its traditional script alongside Cyrillic. The revival of Hebrew from a purely liturgical language to a modern national language is an even more dramatic example, showing it can be done, though contexts differ. But often, the core counter-argument reframes the whole idea of usefulness. Advocates stress that this is primarily about cultural preservation, identity, decolonization of the mind. It's not necessarily about replacing the Latin alphabet for everything. It's about having access to, understanding, and taking pride in a unique heritage. That cultural value is seen as intrinsically important, separate from immediate economic benefit. It's a statement of self.
So it's valuing cultural identity as a benefit in itself.
Precisely. And looking ahead, those academic studies, like SLITs, really emphasize the potential here. Digital Baybayin, when done thoughtfully, can foster that pride and identity through engaging learning and community connection. The recommendations moving forward focus on building that digital infrastructure, strengthening collaboration between universities and communities, and weaving indigenous knowledge systems like Baybayin into the broader educational fabric. It's about sustainable, respectful integration.
So bringing it back to our listener, what does all this mean for someone curious about Baybayin, or maybe someone with Filipino heritage wanting to connect? What's the takeaway?
I think engaging with Baybayin, even just learning a little, offers so much. It's a direct way to connect with Filipino history, a unique path for creative expression, art, design, writing, and it's definitely a way to cultivate and express a distinct identity. And in today's world, learning it, especially through digital tools, isn't just looking backward. It actually builds modern skills, digital literacy, cross-cultural understanding, all through something deeply meaningful and culturally relevant. It's about empowering the next generation to be, as you said, cultural ambassadors, comfortable with both their heritage and the future.
What a fascinating journey it's been. From its ancient roots in a literate pre-colonial society through the challenges of colonization, its quiet survival, and now this vibrant modern renaissance, powered by digital tools and a yearning for identity. Baybayin's story is really one of incredible resilience.
It really is. And I think the most exciting part is that this revival isn't just about digging up the past. It's about actively using that heritage to shape a vibrant, culturally confident future. Baybayin shows how identity can adapt, innovate, and thrive in new ways, finding expression from bamboo etchings to pixels on a screen. It's culture alive and evolving.
A truly powerful example. Well, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity. Maybe look up some Baybayin examples online. Try writing your name with a converter carefully. Or check out some of the artists and organizations keeping this beautiful script alive. Learning is always a journey, and every Baybayin character you explore brings you a little closer to the heart of Filipino heritage. Enjoy the discovery.